Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown podcast. I sincerely hope you're listening to this on our brand new mobile app, and if you don't have it, then download it now. I am pleased to bring on the show today Travis Wu with hoopsmovement.com. And
Hey
the reason
guys.
why we brought him in, I'm sorry?
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, Travis, thanks for coming on. And the thing I want to talk about more often or more with you is not necessarily the dunking stuff, which is really important. It's the landing. And I'm really excited to talk to you because I've seen some stuff that you're doing, and I feel like nobody is talking about the fundamentals of landing.
Yeah, landing is extremely important because this is the riskiest part of basketball. The most injuries are in landing. So if we're able to improve players' landings, we can improve we can extend players' careers across all of basketball, and we can improve really skill because people will spend less time on the bench getting better and more time playing. So this is a huge thing that no one is really talking about.
Well, let's go back to the beginning because I'm curious how you started in your research and figuring out all these different things. Like, how tall are you?
I'm 6 foot. So my interest came into this through my own dunking. I have a really diverse sports background. I got into basketball a little bit later in high school and immediately had an affinity and love for jumping. And after a while, I developed jumper's knee, which is not at all extreme. It's extremely common for basketball players, but and I was recording a lot of my stuff on camera at this point, and I had the idea that maybe it wasn't jumper's knee, it was lander's knee that was the issue. It wasn't the jumping, it was the repetitive impacts. So I started to do some, there's studies out there on this actually that landing technique has a lot to do with injury. The specific studies, there's secondary studies that show the correlation between impact and arthritis, and then you just look at players in the NBA, guys like Paul George, really gruesome injuries, or Brandon Roy, Harold Miner, guys who have advanced osteoarthritis in their 20s.
Mhm.
And then there's the guys like Tim Duncan who are doing something completely different. So I got the idea that I'll copy the oldest players and figure out what they're doing. Studied a little bit of physics, studied parkour and parachute landing and these other landing
Oh.
related sports, and got the idea that a lot of these NBA players actually do know what they're doing, but almost everyone lower level doesn't get taught it. So,
It's funny because someone did a video. I don't think it was yours, but I saw a video on YouTube at some point. And make sure that you guys check out his Travis's YouTube channel as well, which is also Hoops Movement. And you can see a lot of examples of this. But I had seen a video of a montage of Derrick Rose landing over. Was that yours?
yeah,
Or
yeah, that was
okay,
that was mine.
good. So, oh wow, I'd seen this a long time ago, and I was really blown away because again, what you show there is just landing after a landing, twisted on one foot, completely off balance, and just sort of almost reckless. And when we see him injure himself without any kind of contact, what my mind goes right to is it wasn't from that he that jump stop he did. It was from all of those landings building up over the time, and that's what's so important. And I feel like even young kids today learning this stuff would certainly would recognize that what we're seeing like Derrick Rose and his career is kind of fizzling a little bit because of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think the relevance is kind of obvious to everyone, and it's it's really unclear to me why it's not doesn't get more light. But I think it will after this conversation. We can get some more people talking about it, and we're going to talk about not just bad landings, but good landings and why, what makes them good, right?
Perfect. Well, I'm excited about this because again, yeah, when we talk about footwork, when we talk about fundamentals, we're always looking at like when you have the ball, right? And like that, how you're supposed to, use your pivots and turns there. But I can't stress it enough that footwork is landing. It's landing. I would have to imagine. I teach it, even basically with my focus, landing quietly. I'm wondering, do you have any? Is that part of your curriculum?
Definitely, because impact creates sound, right?
Hmm.
So if there's a loud clunk thud, right, that's physically means there was a big impact. So yeah, if you can land silently, then presumably there's no issue. So that's one way to tell.
Yeah. So where would you start then, basically, when you're kind of breaking it down and want to sort of spread this knowledge and have people learn how to do this? Where
Uh-huh.
do we start?
Well, first we have the relevance. We touched on this a little bit, but I mean, just the categories of landing injuries. If you're not fully aware, there's leg snaps, legs snapping in half. Paul George, Sean Livingston, Kevin Ware. There's bad falls. Evan Turner broke his back. Andrew Bogut broke his arm. There's ankle sprains on threes are extremely common. Vince Carter sprained his ankle on Bruce Bowen. And just in the last 5 to 10 years, they started to protect NBA players with landing zone fouls, right?
Hmm.
But that's not on all levels of basketball yet. Then there's just the arthritic knees. So that's the importance. Now that we know, okay, this is why it's relevant and it affects all of us. I would say the best place to start is an understanding of the very basic physics. Physics is intimidating to people. We don't need to really get into the math. We don't need to get into the equations. There's two basic principles, or three really. Nick touched on land quietly, sound is impact. So two main keys beyond that. The first one is the rate of change of speed. The faster you change speed, the more joint force, the greater risk of injury. The slower you change speed, the less injury. So for instance, if you take 10 steps to run, jump as high as you can and try to cut back on one leg, you are trying to change speeds all at once, your leg's going to snap like Paul George. That's not a freak accident, actually. That's just how it happens. The alternative is taking 10 steps to slow down, right? Running through, slowing down very slowly. That's what LeBron James is good at. You see him dunk it and then just keep running. Michael Jordan as well. Those are what the good 1 foot landers do. Then the other main key, that's the first key is don't slow down all at once. Right, roll,
Yeah.
run through it, whatever. The second is drop distance and impact. The higher the drop, the more force. Right, you drop out of an airplane, it's a lot. But if you
Yeah.
drop from 40 inches, it's a lot different than 20 inches because the way gravity works is it is kind of exponentiates. Sorry for the big word, but
No
uh,
worries.
basically, so we see certain guys like pull up on the rim and slap the backboard and they land from like 4 feet. And then Tim Duncan will get diagonal and he's got a 9.5 inch standing vertical reach and the breakaway rim drops 6 inches. He doesn't have impact. He doesn't land, right?
Wow.
Hassan Whiteside is another guy right now with the 10-foot standing diagonal reach. Wilt Chamberlain had that. So that's how the big guys who last a long time last a long time. They don't land at all. There's no impact. So
Huh. That's
those,
fascinating.
yeah, it is.
No, so I love the idea behind like running as you're landing on the dunk, at full speed to try and take those steps. Now, obviously, at the NBA level, it's a little bit more difficult because there's no room when you land. Although I guess you can argue, like even most high school gyms, there's only 3 feet to the wall, right?
Yeah.
But that's even that is still enough, right?
Yeah, well, it depends. So what LeBron does, and I use LeBron as an example of a good lander, right? He is very rarely injured. He is played so many minutes, and he, by the basic physics, it seems good. So he runs through if he comes at an angle. He also lands in a back pedal a lot for whatever reason. Backpedaling is a good way to decelerate. So we'll get into that in a little bit. That's more theoretical. But he comes in from the side and runs through it. Or what LeBron does a lot, and Michael would do this on his free throw line dunk, is run into the padded backstop and
Yeah.
slow down that way. So that's something you can do as well.
So yeah, so he's going to use the slowing with his hand, like the body up above, as opposed to putting all the force of slowing down on
Exactly.
his knees and his ankles. Now, what about landing on both feet? Is that a real importance? Do you feel like in your studies, or you can learn how to do either way safely?
I mean, the reality is it's like very complex and strategic. It depends on how fast you're moving forward versus how fast you're moving downward. So if you're jumping straight up and straight down, then sure, land on two, or land on all fours is even better. If you're taking a long horizontal jump off 1 foot,
Hmm.
then it, a lot of the time you're going to want to come down running, so 1 foot is fine. Like the worst is like a 1 foot cutback, right? That's the that's just the worst way to land.
Wait, so explain a 1 foot cutback means as you're landing, you're trying to then cut into different direction.
Yeah, like Paul George example. If
Yeah.
you haven't watched
Although,
that,
well, the thing, But what do we say? Because people will say, well, Paul George got his his leg caught between the stanchion and the floor as well. But you
Hmm.
feel like that would have snapped anyway?
I mean, his is the same as Kevin Ware and Paul George. He
Okay.
uh, tried to, yeah, like if it takes, think about it this way is another way. If it takes you 10 steps to accelerate to full speed, it should take you 10 steps to decelerate to full speed, to back to zero, right? It shouldn't happen in
Okay.
one step.
Okay. I hear you. Okay. So yeah. So we want to avoid that. It's important. And it's certainly the quiet notion of that. Um, Now, you mentioned ankle injuries on jumpers, and because we teach the sway, where when we
Mhm.
want your legs to
Mhm.
sort of flow forward and you
Mhm.
bend at the waist. And there's a couple interesting things
Mhm.
about that. And I talked to some trainers about this as well, who are, you'll see Kobe do it, you'll see, everyone
Mhm.
does it, like, it's very
Mhm.
natural. But then a lot of times you end up landing on one foot. And a lot of trainers, or at least one trainer I was speaking to recently, was like, that's just an injury waiting to happen, even though with Steph, for instance, Steph doesn't jump very high, so the impact can't be that much, even
Uh-huh.
on one foot.
Uh-huh.
So, but I guess the reason why I was mentioning it was that I feel like people ask me that all the time about, oh, you're gonna sprain your ankle, but I feel like I just don't feel like it happens that often. Do you think it does?
So this type of sprain is 100% avoidable, and I think this is the biggest takeaway that everyone should know who's listening to this, because everyone's at risk of this. So you're absolutely right, or he's right. There's risk if you're shooting and you're leaning forward, or your feet are coming forward, and you land on someone's foot, you can sprain. But what we see Jamal Crawford and Steph Curry do, these are the guys to watch. They land on all fours. Their feet come forward and they land with their hands as well. So even if you land on someone's foot, you have now 4 impact points instead of 2. So this, if you look at Bruce Bowen's sprains or Kobe's sprain, Kobe had a really bad sprain on one of these. They're trying to land upright, so yeah, you are at risk of that. But I mean, what really, yeah, watch Jamal Crawford's 48 and 1 threes mix. He's all over the floor every time.
Yeah,
Never gets his ankle sprained. Same with Steph Curry now and some other guys. This has actually become like kind of the norm in the NBA. A lot of people think that it's flopping, but it prevents this. It reduces the risk of this sprain down to nearly zero, right?
love it. That I love
Yeah.
that idea. You're right. Because you learn how to land is one thing, but you kind of learn how to fall, right?
Yeah,
So you never
exactly.
put. Yeah, because you're right. I mean, I know I sprained my ankles dozens of times in high school, never let them heal. They still hurt now, and it was because I was coming down on one foot with all my weight. Boom! Someone's foot was there. Well, actually, it's not true. In my senior year, I finally learned. I actually, as I ever got close to being rolling it, I could like quickly bend my leg and sort of fall, and then I would pop right back up. And I remember some dude thinking like, "Oh, he broke my ankles because I went to the ground." But I was up so fast that he never got an advantage because I kind of got used to doing that. So is that something we could actually practice and teach?
Yeah, absolutely. I do this and I recommend this. I have this drill on the website at hoopsmovement.com, but you can just imagine you do a catch and shoot situation and the defender comes underneath you and you
Yeah,
land on all fours. And the goal isn't to make a bunch of them, but just to get, when it happens in the game, you are prepared to do that. Because you're going to shoot free throws in a lot of levels of basketball because your landing zone should be protected, right? But yeah, I mean, you can do this. There's 2 ways to do this at practice. You deliberately, you tell your players, hey, look, you're gonna miss this shot probably, but shoot it, and they're gonna slide. A defender is gonna foul you by sliding under you. You're gonna land on all fours. The goal is just not to get hurt and to get comfortable doing this game. You can also do this with layups because the what this landing is actually what I like to call this landing, and it makes what people generally call this landing is the backslide landing. It works really well on. It kind of evolves out of breakdance where they do the sliding and parkour where they do the rolling, but it makes
hmm
the most sense in basketball because a basketball court is low friction, which means you can really slide like for days on it. And again,
yeah,
the slower you change your rate of speed, the less risk of injury. So we see Steph Curry's gotten way better. I mean, think about Steph Curry with his 11 ankle sprains or 7, whatever. He stopped spraining his ankle, and then what happened? Best player in the world, right?
right.
So, um, yeah, you can have your players do this on layups. We're gonna foul you, and just get to all fours on your back and slide away. So this is really, really common for Shooters, Steph Curry, Jamal Crawford, right, and some other guys. It's Kyle Korver does this a lot as well. It's also common. The guy who does it is a master at this. From his dunks is Dwayne Wade. Now, some people will say, okay, well, D Wade has bad knees. Why would we copy him? D Wade had his meniscus removed after Marquette before the NBA. This was before they had reparative or whatever reconstructive
Yeah,
meniscus
that's
surgery. They just
right.
cut that out. He's not supposed to last 11, 12 years and win 2 NBA championships, right? So he protects his knees by landing on all fours and sliding. There's not really any impact. He also does some forward slides. One other guy to look for in this is Tim Duncan. Actually, he not only does the dunkless or the landingless drop, but he also does lots of backslide landings. You can see this on his career mixes. Actually, he was doing backslides as a rookie. People say
Huh.
that he was, he came in playing like an old man. He really did, like to every detail. So
Wow. Now, so and to me, when you say backslides, I kind of think about if I take a charge and I land on my ass and I kind of slide. Is that sort of the
exactly.
same idea?
Yeah, you take this little push with your hands, and then you just go
Yeah.
sliding. Michael Jordan also did this a lot. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's how we know it's good, right?
Yeah. Well, so and then it sounds like there's a lot of other places that you can learn these, or like where you can reference these techniques in landing in other sports too, right?
Yeah, so for instance, I mentioned parkour. Parkour is kind of the study of, it's really like the study of impact. So there's lots of landing, and there's some studies in that as well that shows that you land on all fours, it's better than two. If you roll, it's better than uh, otherwise. But parkour doesn't have much sliding because it's generally on grass and concrete.
Hmm.
Where yeah. And then there's breakdance, which is sliding. Another really interesting, well, yeah, okay, so there's parachute landing. The Army, the jump squad actually practices this. They go to 10 feet and then 20 feet and then 30 feet, and you're
Huh.
supposed to roll from 6 different directions, and only then can you go from the plane. Yeah, really interesting. Um,
Wait. When they jump from like 20 feet with no
Parachute,
parachute,
they do
that's
have parachute at that point.
okay.
Yeah,
All right, good.
yeah. A couple other interesting ones. Track and high jumping, and I want to get into this at the end. They have landing zones. They have dedicated landing zones, and I would be interested in maybe having like padding in the out of bounds in basketball, not on
Huh.
the inbounds. But we can learn something from that. However, one more key sport which is really really interesting is skating, rollerblading. So we see guys do crazy, and the extreme rollerbladers jump off like 30-foot drops and are able to land safely, and they land backwards always because it's like a squat. You can take more out if you sit back into your landing. They call this fakie style. So that is another reason why the backslide is better than the front slide, perhaps, because the backslide is actually, if we really break it down and analyze it, it's a squat into a dip into a you're sliding at that point. So it's you can diffuse a lot from just a squat and then a lot from a dip. So it's a nice combination. And
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, and because we're always talking about multi-sport training and being able to help, soccer can help with footwork and all that kind of stuff. But, like parkour, actually, I could see that. In fact, we've been meaning to go to a parkour place in LA and do some filming just to show that there's some really great cross training there, independent of the landings as well. But certainly, I mean, it's really, you're right. It's hard to believe that we haven't had more focus on this. And the backwards landing that you're talking about, now that you say it, it's like, yeah, I could picture a lot of guys doing that. And I suppose they're doing it because they just sort of somehow stumbled upon it, right? I don't know if anyone's actually teaching this, right?
I don't know. It's unclear. I mean,
Yeah.
I watch guys like Jamal Crawford, Dwayne Wade, Tim Duncan, Steph Curry do it so much that it's like they must know.
Yeah.
I'm not in contact with these guys, but it seems like they must know.
I hear you. Well, how else does this evolve into like what you're teaching? What else have you discovered about, the correct landing and techniques?
Uh-huh. So, sorry, excuse me. A few thoughts are that it's really strategic. It's not like really, there's some cliches like land on the balls of your feet or land quiet. Landing quiet is good as well, but it's like it's actually very very strategic. It's not like always land this one way. You need like 6 different styles, right? Sometimes you're going to land on all fours in the front. Wilt Chamberlain was good at this. Or if you look at Wilt's tape, he was like a great at landing. He was a track and field guy,
Uh-huh.
multi-sport guy. So you should be able to do the back slides, run into the backstop and run through it. Another key thing that we mentioned with the low point drops, not everyone has a 9.5 foot or 10 foot diagonal reach. So, I mean, well, for one, you probably shouldn't pull yourself up and then drop 48 inches, right?
Yeah.
But what you can do, and I mean, I personally do this in my dunking. People hate it, but I love it, and I know I'm going to live longer because of it. But you can go from the rim and then put one hand in the net, and then from there
Oh.
I've got an 8 foot diagonal reach, and there's no landing on that. And it's, you know, it's just not macho. People don't like, right? But I have seen LeBron do that once. He put his hand in the net and then swung back around. And
Huh.
I've seen Allen Iverson do a split hang. Yeah, so here's another key thing is if you screw up the hang, that's another really serious way to get injured. For you dunkers out there, if you go for two hands, that's how Bogut broke his back, or Evan Turner broke his back, I think. Bogut,
Yeah.
yeah, if you miss the hang, basically. So you can use a split hang. You're not supposed to get into the net first because if they think it's giving you a boost, then it's cheating or whatever. But I mean, it's okay, and Allen Iverson has done this in a game. If you finish with a split hang, that way, because the net is lower to the ground, so there's just less. If you end up slipping and falling, you're falling 12 inches less. So basically, if you imagine finishing a dunk, instead of hanging two hands in the rim, you hang one hand on the rim, one hand on the net, and the net.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. You know what? So now you're getting into like I remember I had a kid who played for me, and we were going over individual moves, just me and like three kids going in a line, and he was working on dunking as a finish, and he did the pull up on the rim, and then his feet came up, and then he like let go, and then landed, and split his eyebrow ridge, it's 8 stitches, broke his wrist. And I remember thinking then, I was like, I wish I had some sort of fundamentals of dunking. Like, what do I tell that kid? And what you just broke down there is amazing. And another one of those things that nobody ever talks about is, you grab the net. Also, by the way, you could probably get your hand in there. You don't slip as easily right
It's
off
so
of the
easy to
net.
hang on to. Like it is design. It feels like it's designed for a hand. It's soft
Right. Okay.
mesh with all kinds of pockets, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose people have gotten their fingers caught in there, maybe hurting them, so they don't feel that way. But you're right on a dunk, at least. That sounds. It's very provocative what you're talking about, and I totally see how you can certainly limit the amount of pressure you're putting on your legs as you land, even from just another 6, 8, 12 inches lower.
Yeah. So let's talk about a few ways to make it happen. So first of all, as a coach, I've coached a couple years. It's not really my specialty. As far as teams. But I mean, it seems like it makes sense to reward thoughtful landings. Just say, I mean, with my players or my friends or whatever, I always try to say nice landing when they have a good landing or a thoughtful landing, just to
Uh-huh.
reinforce it. Or I mean, I don't know about, or I draw attention to it if they don't like landings if they're obsessed with the jump, right? So what do you think about that as far as implementing it as a coach?
Oh, absolutely. Because the positive reinforcement for that kind of stuff is really key. Because once you start saying that's a bad landing, that kind of starts to reinforce the bad habits. And without question, I think you get a lot more from that because players want positive reinforcement. And it's an easy one to do when they do it, and they'll start to think about it. I mean, without question, you need to do that. Now, I remember I went to an LMU practice, Loyola Marymount, and like when they run, it's silent. I'm telling you, 12, 14 guys running, sprinting down the court, and you don't hear a peep. It's actually startlingly like amazing.
Yeah,
And that I know that they work on it as well. And they might not be positive. They might be like, this is going to save you. You better do it. But you can reinforce it that way as well, just in your sprinting, without question. In my mind, once they become cognizant of that and aware of that, then it'll translate into landing and everything else.
that's a good point. The best players are the quietest players. Generally it seems that way. Not in all
Yeah.
cases. So,
Yeah. Now, you know what's funny about this real quick is that,
go ahead.
we talk all about the hop. And
Uh-huh.
for me, the hop is a vital technique to acceleration or to shoot. And I remember I do get people who complain, "Oh, you're going to blow out your knee that way," and it's very frustrating because I feel like it's sort of what we're talking about here. The hop is the wrong term, and just like we want to go on a whole national campaign to get people to understand, or the worldwide campaign to understand landings, we have to change the word hop. I think it should be called drop because there is no upward motion. You are simply the feet lift and you go down, which I feel like, and I know you're going to accelerate up, but I feel like if I were to jump there and then land and jump on that landing, that would be the real, difficult part of the knees absorbing that shock. So, how does the hop fit into this, do you feel like?
Well, I mean, the body is pretty good at absorbing smaller forces. So, I mean, when people take the hop, you could call it, it's not like a massive jump stop
Right.
into a dunk, right? So, I mean, it just seems
It's two
like,
inches. Yeah, literally
yeah,
2 inches off the ground and you drop into it.
yeah, it seems, I mean, the body can actually take a lot. I mean, this is like, I mean, small landings you can land upright on your, with a calf raise or whatever. It's more like the bigger drops you need to do
Mhm.
something else to protect yourself. But I mean, the hop seems perfectly safe.
Yeah, cool. I mean, because here's the thing, my retort to when people say, "Oh, you're gonna blow out your knee," and the girls when they do it in high school they blow out their knees, I'm like, basketball is not necessarily a good sport for your knees.
No, it's
Anything
definitely
you do,
bad. Yeah.
yeah, right. It's like go swimming if you're concerned about your knees necessarily. So yeah, I agree, and I'm glad that we can that you can kind of draw the parallels with like the landing when you're literally 2 feet in the air and that's compounding and boom. Versus like a quick drop into an explosion. I feel like this plays into that as well. And by the way, the hop shouldn't be loud either. You might get the squeak of the
hmm
shoe, but it's definitely not like a big thud when you hit the ground.
I did want to touch on the hop as far as a rebound when you are coming down from 2 and 3 feet, because we
Uh,
haven't mentioned rebound landings. Those, I mean, the norm is just to land upright, which is it's unclear. It's unclear. So a better way might be to land in a squat if players can do a deep squat. Another way is a 3-point landing where you either cuff the ball and land on three, or you push the ball into the ground. I know if you start dribbling after that, some refs think it's a double dribble or something like that.
mhm.
But on a rebound, if you go up way high and then you're landing upright, you're not going to get hurt right away probably, but you're going to feel a dull knee pain after practice. But, and this is something you could train with players as well, is you go up high for the rebound and then you come down low for the landing. And that also protects the rebound because the little players come up behind and try to poke it out, right?
Right.
So there's,
Oh, right, because that would be the thing that people would say was, "What are you talking about? You can't bring the ball down. You can't. The guards are going to get it from you when you get the rebound." So I suppose that in doing a squat, you can save your knees, but then there's another little something we have to do in there to figure out how to then protect the ball, right?
well, I mean, yeah, I suppose. Like if you're coming down low enough, you're even too low for them to get, is what I'm saying.
Okay. I mean, it's also you can be coming down low, and then as you're aware of that, you can be pivoting to use your backside to
Yeah.
protect the ball as well. They can only come from one side.
Or you bounce back up. Would just encourage using a greater range of motion because then there's more muscle involvement and less involvement. Presumably,
Okay.
that's the theory.
I'm interested in that because whenever of course catching the ball on a rebound and you got to hold it over your head, like that's been the fundamental for 60 years, and whenever we see a rule like that or a fundamental that's been around that long, I always look at those very skeptically. Is it really that vital or important? And you know what? It might not be. That strip might not really happen as often as people think, and there might be just a little trick into that. Maybe as they land and they're kind of they pivot and then boom, there's no worry about that at all. Kind of like when we talk about the dip on the shot. Well, it makes it too slow and people get their shot blocked from three, and it's like I've almost never seen a 3-point shot blocked at any level. So anyhow, so that's good stuff.
Uh-huh. Okay, one other, let's talk about implementing it. We talked about how to coach it. So one
Yeah.
thing I'm interested in is the reffing. So, especially at the high school level, refs love to blow their whistle on rim hangs. And I think this was Derrick Rose's downfall because he never ever, if you look through his career dunk landing mix, he never hangs on the rim ever. And that's just reinforced from an early age in AAU. You see it.
Oh.
They just refs love to tech rim hangs. They think it's showing off. They don't understand the practicality behind it. So, what do you think about this? I mean, have you seen that? You noticed that? Even in the
Well,
NBA,
just
you see it sometimes. Like,
Oh, last night Jimmy Butler did it and he lifted himself up. Now that you wouldn't have liked it because he ended up doing a chin up and then landing, so there was a bigger landing for him. But there's without question there are times, I don't know exactly the percentage of times, where it still feels like they're looking to figure out where they can land safely, but the ref will tee him up. And there's no question, you're right. The high school level, it is definitely an issue that they don't understand.
the most egregious in history that I can think of is DeJuan Blair doesn't have ACLs. He's a
Yeah.
miracle. His ACLs are removed. There's a clip of him on YouTube where he comes running in for a dunk, and this guy is so big and so heavy and doesn't have ACLs. He grabs the rim and he swings forward and then swings back up the court, and the refs tech him up for what? Like for touching the rim. So, yeah, I mean, certain high school stars are coming up just never hang on the rim because of that, and it leads to early arthritis. So, I think it would be
Wow.
good if refs like respect the hang more.
Yeah, because you know what, right? I like it. There's something about okay, we get the idea about sportsmanship and like maybe you're trying to show off, but at this point, it's like who cares? Anyway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like I know that there's a technical foul for you don't want to slam the ball on the ground either because you're angry,
Mhm.
but this is an expression of joy in theory, and it's not anger and disrespect to the refs. It's not like you're arguing a call. So and I'm old school, but I feel like you're right. Even still, just to let's get rid of one more thing the ref has to deal with,
Yeah.
as far as judgment. So I'm with you, and also. You're right. I can see how that would help players land more softly.
Yeah, I mean, and if Derrick Rose plays, got a extra 5 years to his career, everyone would be happy. I'm not happy that
No.
what's been happening to him. Okay, so last kind of question, which I'm interested to pick your brain on. So the NBA baseline out of bounds, there's a few things that could be done to the court itself to maybe increase injury, right? We look at Paul George, he didn't have enough landing space. However, that was not the NBA, that was the Olympic or FIBA international,
Hmm.
whatever. There was like 2 feet less. However, you can definitely see people having to cut their landing short or go into the stands or run into someone does a free throw line dunk or whatever. So, would it make sense to extend the baseline out of bounds to allow for more landing space a few feet? So, the cons are perhaps there's less space for near seats, maybe there's less ticket revenue. However, there might be less catastrophic injuries, but also I believe that sometimes players don't jump. The smart ones don't jump if there's nowhere to land. If there's more places to land, there might be more jumping, might be more high flying dunks and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's also because of the cameramen who also the players get hurt falling into those as well. Or we haven't seen a serious injury as far as I can remember from a camera thing, but we've seen potential for that as well. So that's the problem. Is obviously those seats are the most expensive, or some of the most expensive, and you're going to lose a row. Let's just pretend it's one row. So that's going to be 20, seats times
mhm,
500, whatever. It's a lot
mhm,
of money. But I agree. I wish there was something they could do to extend it. And if it's, I think the hockey thing is an issue because the hockey thing around the side. Otherwise, you could say, yeah, move all the seats back. There should be some room to move that last row on the floor back, but a lot of times there's none because of that. So I agree. I wish they had more room. They definitely need it, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Probably not. I'm going to make a compelling case for the NBA here. How much money did you guys lose from, again, this is not the
Uh,
NBA, this is a little bit less landing space in this court, but how much money did you guys lose from Paul George's injury? So much, right? So much
yeah,
money is lost. To invest so much money in players that can't play. Okay.
absolutely. And
So,
by the way, yeah, it set the Pacers back, the whole team, and then their playoff hopes. I mean, he's obviously come back, but for that year he was gone without question. So yeah, it's a lot of money on both ends.
and then the last one, this is even less likely to happen. But if there was say a padded landing zone. So you have the backstop is padded. What if the backstop padding extended to a little bit of the ground so that you could land on that? Again, it's only the out of bounds, it's not the inbounds, and maybe that would disrupt the current backside landings people do. But I mean, it'd be cool if you could do your dunk and then you land on padding out of bounds, and then
Would you have to make the padding flush with the wood, or can it come up off of the wood a little bit on top of the wood?
it's unclear. I mean, this is not only like this one is difficult to implement as well, but
Yeah,
I just
but
want to share the theory.
there's no. But by the way, because again, there's no reason why you couldn't do that. That especially underneath the basket, from the edge of the backboard to the edge of the backboard. There's nobody inbound. Oh, you know what? You're inbound the ball on a make. I was thinking when on out of bounds play, they're
Hmm.
always clear of that area.
Hmm.
But when you inbound it on a live ball situation, but then again, so what? It's a little softer there. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. I guess I have to kind of really see the numbers of how often guys are landing on that part of it, because maybe someone's going to say, they almost never land there, so why would we do that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's more for like discussion than something we'll actually see. But maybe in the far future of basketball, right? Things really evolve in this game over 5, 10, 20 years. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe there'll be a new surface that they play on that is different. Although those wood floors seem to have a lot of give, right?
they're bouncy. Yeah.
And a lot of people probably haven't been on a real court that's put over ice or whatever, like in a stadium, because I remember in my high school we had two courts. One was like that, or not like that, but a little bit like that. The other one was on concrete. It was like it was a parquet floor on concrete, and that was another recipe for disaster. I'm surprised we never had like a major knee injury in all those years I was coaching at that gym, because it's so hard in the landing just by landing on concrete basically.
That's true. I mean, I mean, the problem is the backslide doesn't apply to concrete at all, also. So
Yeah.
this doesn't help a lot of players around the world. And for that, I mean, check out parkour. You can actually back roll on concrete, and it's not so bad.
Yeah. Oh, and we've seen back rolls too. I think Shaq would do them sometimes, right?
Yeah, yeah, back rolls happen. It's just the low friction court is conducive to sliding, but high friction is more conducive to rolling. So
Cool.
it's a matter of terrain.
Well, Travis, this was a really enlightening conversation. I'm glad that we could have it. Let us know where we can find you so I don't screw it up. I want to give it to us directly.
Yeah, so you can find us at Hoops Movement, and if you look through our videos, you'll find different things on landing and on some other things as well. If you go to hoopsmovement.com, we have a free ebook, which is the ultimate landing survival guide. It's a strategy guide, like a video game strategy. It's a really cool thing where it's like, here's why it matters. Here's when to use a backslide. Here's when to use a cat landing. Here's when to land on upright. Here's when to run through your landings, etc. So that, again, this is complicated. There's not one correct way to land. It's good to have a bunch of tricks in your bag. So hoopsmovement.com, check it out there. And
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing these ideas. I look forward to talking to you in the future, because I'm sure there's going to be more and more things that we discover about the stuff. And let's make this happen. Let's make more people aware of landing. I think that's going to be. I talk about it a lot. Probably since I saw that video about Derrick Rose, whenever that was a couple of years ago. And I still get people who are like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Like I never really thought of it." And we got to get that on people's minds.
yeah, man, it's a real pleasure, Nick. I love what you do. Love your open-mindedness, and glad you're on board for the landings. It's
Cool.
awesome.
Thanks, Travis. I appreciate it. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in?
I'm
Are
in.
you in, Travis?
I am in, Nick.
All right.